Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who is back at it with Thunderground Thursday. If you don't know, I try to every week. It's been kind of a weird month. I try to every week feature a band that's less known or that I didn't know about or is a little bit more underground, and I would appreciate it if you left a comment or a like or a something, smash the like bucket, because whenever I do this, it's very important for the channel, right? It's very important that I share new music with you, not just stuff that you already know or stuff that I already know. But the algorithm hates this. The algorithm thinks that this whole section is just some dumb hick. And so I would very much like it if you sort of boosted it up. Because the band I'm going to be describing today and talking about, Walt Disco and their album Unlearning, why is this not bigger? You're going to listen to this music and you're going to be like, oh my God, this is the greatest. How is this not bigger? How is this not a big cultural movement? How have I not gotten 50 messages saying, Sky, please review Walt Disco. I got to hear what you got to say about Walt Disco. That's how good they are. So, now let me talk about sort of how I got into them. And just so you know, you may hear the sound in the background of my dog Bo walking around and shaking his head. He has an ear infection. There's nothing to be done about it. That's part of my aesthetic now, is dogs with ears infections. So, how did I stumble into this band? Well, sometimes, speaking of that nasty old algorithm, sometimes it's right. So on Tidal, this was the most suggested album for me that came out last week. I don't know how they knew that I would like it, but I liked it a lot. I did a little bit of research. Turns out they're from Scotland. You may or may not know this. I have a weakness for Scotland, especially for Glasgow, where they're from. I like artists from Glasgow. I like comic book writers from Glasgow. I spent a month in Glasgow. I was house sitting for one summer. I'm named after a Scottish island, so I have sort of a thing for Scottish art. I'm interested in it. But then the more I got into their music and the more I got into their whole sort of presentation, the more I realized I had a lot to say about them. You see, there's a lot of different things you can say about this band, and there isn't that much written about them, but what you can read about them usually is sort of filtered through the way that people want to see them. So I read some article in a very well-written article for a gay website that really posited them as a gay band, another one in a Scottish website that posited them as a Scottish band, but really, fundamentally, what they are is glam rock and roll. If I had to give just one sentence, I would say, what if Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars were millennials from Scotland? That's what this album is. And if that doesn't interest you, I don't know why you watch my channel in the first place. Because if I were you, I would hit stop on this and I would run to the record store /Tidal, Spotify, whatever, and listen to an album that is described as Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars as Millennial Scotsmen. But what I want to do is before I really get into the album, just talk more about glam itself and about the value and the importance of glam. And it goes beyond the fact that it's good music, usually. I mean, I can't think of bad glam music. When we think of glam music, we think of a certain era of Bowie, a certain era of Lou Reed, T-Rex. I mean, all this is good music, right? But also sort of culturally. And what makes, I think, this band interesting, Walt Disco, is, they're very much into the wearing makeup and women's clothing. And I think it's worth mentioning in this time where, thankfully, trans rights are human rights, and that's being recognized. And a lot of these things that are more accepted, we have to remember how shocking they were. The glam movement was a huge step forward for LGBTQIA plus rights. It really was. And it introduced, really, gender bending to the masses in a way that only Bugs Bunny succeeded in doing when he dressed up like a woman and turned on a young, confused Professor Sky. It's true. I think we need to spend more time thinking about this era, thinking about the 70s, thinking about glam, thinking about the value of it. And I'm going to tell you a story. Now listen, I tell you all these personal stories not because I'm so interesting, but because I think my stories are actually quite universal. I just think I say a lot of things that maybe people don't think about saying, but I'm going to say them. I'm going to tell you a story about Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. You see, when I first bought that CD, it was the second CD I bought of David Bowie after Greatest Hits, and I remember I got the Ryko disc. I would show it to you, but I lost it. Someone stole it in college. I had the Ryko disc, which was the name of the person who reissued the album, and there was a thing where you could send away for $15 and get a whole booklet of pictures of David Bowie from that era. I asked my mom to buy it, and my parents were very supportive of my musical interests, my musical taste. Always, always, always. But she wouldn't get that. And I sort of asked her why, and she didn't really say it explicitly, and my mom was a very open-minded person. But I could tell she wasn't entirely comfortable with me spending that much time staring at a handsome young British man dressed up like a woman and wearing lots of makeup. Even though I grew up in a very progressive family, in a very progressive town, I still grew up 30 years ago. I still grew up in a very homophobic, transphobic, very prescribed gender role society. And rock and roll, especially glam rock, was one of the ways out of that. Now, of course, my mom was wrong. She should have bought it for me. And I got my revenge. I actually worked for a couple of weeks for the makeup company Urban Decay. So for a couple months, I wore eyeshadow. So what'd you know? Professor Sky had his glam face. As I'm listening to this band and listening, first of all, I'm talking all about their exterior. The music is so good, you don't need any of it. It's just like Bowie. I mean, Bowie could have been a 600-pound, albino, and it wouldn't matter. Like, his music is just so good. The fact that he was so handsome and attractive, more important than being handsome, added to it, but not really to the music. So just the music, and I will get into it soon, with Walt Disco is good enough. While I was watching their videos, I was like, yeah, it's sexy. They're all men dressed up as women. As far as I know, none of them have changed. None of them identify as otherwise. And I just realized that, this has been a great service that glam music has done for me in my homophobic milieu, in my homophobic upbringing, in my transphobic upbringing, that in addition to Bugs Bunny dressing up as a woman, the only times I would ever allow myself even the smallest amount of non-hetero feelings. Any amount of attraction to somebody who was assigned male at birth would be for Jimi Hendrix when he was super flamboyant, David Bowie, Morrissey, right? And I think that we need to appreciate that. I reviewed this album last year by Yves Tumor, another great glam album. It's just great. It's also just the excuse me, I don't edit my videos, so I have a little... I don't even have my coffee cup. I'm going to go grab my coffee cup. This is going to be a good enough point. You're not going to mind waiting for me to grab my coffee cup. You can tell me in the comments how much you like that part where I walked away from the camera, or how much you hate it, and how much you wish I did all the editing, where every 5 seconds I'm cutting in between sentences. But it made me realize that this music is so enjoyable, and it allows you to tap into a lot of the theatricality of musicals, which I would never allow myself to like. I never liked musicals. I always thought they weren't for me. Probably, to a certain level, it was embodiment of a certain form of homophobia. And glam music allows you to feel that sense of theatricality and rock. Before even moving, 8 minutes in. I apologize, by the way, if you're really into this album and you're just waiting for someone to talk about it. I promise I'm going to give a really good breakdown of this album. But I also want to talk about something else that glam music can do that other forms of music can't. Have lead singers. Actual, factual lead singers. The guys or the girls who are out front, being flamboyant, making you look up and adulate and clap and get emotional and all those feelings. I don't believe that rock is dead. I think rock is well alive and it's doing great. Not in the mainstream, but whatever. But part of the issue is, it's really good to have a frontman. Or a frontwoman, but all the examples I'm going to be giving are frontmen. Mick Jagger, Roger Daltrey, Robert Plant, Johnny Rotten, Mark Bolan. All these bands, to have this kind of central figure. Even in the 80s, when allegedly we moved away from it, we had Robert Smith and Morrissey. It was really, I think, the 90s that destroyed rock and roll, not because, I don't know, because hip-hop took over, but it definitely, like, with the exception of, like, maybe Jarvis Cocker from Pulp, like, most of the lead singers were reluctant. That was their trademark. Eddie Vedder tried to leave the music business while being in the music business. Kurt Cobain killed himself. Tom York does his absolute best to not be a frontman while being a frontman. Even now, with the best active rock band I believe to be out there, Black Country New Road, their lead singer left. The pressure of being the lead singer. And if we look at this whole post-punk moment that we're living in, especially with a lot of this music coming out of Britain, we have a lot of people really struggling to not be the guy, or not be the girl, or not be the person who's in the center of everything. But glam needs it. Glam needs a lead singer for that theatricality. And that's definitely what we get with this band, Walt Disco. Now, when you listen to this band, you're going to say the same thing I said. Oh my God, this guy is totally trying to sound like David Bowie. True. He sounds so much like David Bowie that you could mistake his singing for David Bowie. I have a couple points about this. One, you do it. You try to be like Bowie. You try to be able to sing in David Bowie's campy style and then in his slight yelling style and have it work and be on tune. I guarantee you can't. So being like Bowie is like being a guitarist like Hendrix. Go ahead, do it. But it goes much deeper than that. I think that the music on this album is such a great mix of different influences. Like I said, like it's so easy to compare them to 80s groups or to 90s groups or to sort of goth. Like if you read descriptions of their music, it's always like goth, glam, proto, post, all this stuff. Really, if we just boil it down, it's just very well written, engaging music. And one of my favorite things, if you watch this channel, one of my favorite things is production detail. Little details in every single song that pop out when you listen to it a second, third, fourth time, where you hear just these layers of instrumentation, little tiny instances that make everything super interesting. You put it all together and you have like a great album. So let me give you my stamp. This is my example song. Hey, this song has 187 views on YouTube. Would you please do me the service of clicking on this song timeline? This, I think, exemplifies better than even their singles what makes Walt Disco a great band. First of all, a great name, Walt Disco. Like it sounds like Disney, but then it's disco, pop art, everything. It's great. So go there, watch this song, listen to this song. So much movement. I mean, it starts with like these synth blares. It almost sounds like a Billie Jean, Michael Jackson drum line. And then the voice comes in and it's so crisp and so beautifully Bowie-ish. Like, I read the lyrics. They're in the description. And how he delivers these lines. My first look into your eyes, I became so shy. And when you smiled, I felt so high. It's not your fault, but it sure ain't mine. The way he sings these lines, it's like... I can't even come close. It's like this explosion of voice and pitch, and it's beautiful. And then at the end, there's this like crazy operatic vibrato. It's one thing to sound like David Bowie. It's another thing to be able to do that switch to the Bowie yell. Like he doesn't yell like, right? But like there's a certain like added layer of intensity. And when we think about the genius of Bowie, and it's hard not to, that often gets overlooked, that vocal capacity. But then the production gets interesting. There's like a weird auto-tune bit. Or maybe a vocoder. I don't hate you, but this wasn't love. Kiss my neck one last time. Bonne nuit, je te verrai sur ma timeline. Switches into French there, which I promise isn't the reason I picked the song. I couldn't understand the lyrics, so it was only when I read them, after I decided to make this my stamp. The kind of interesting sexuality, kiss my neck one last time, I'll see you in my timeline, interesting theme of sort of modern love and modern relationships. Then the second verse, like, again, production details, little plucky fun bass, little sounds added, production details everywhere. Then the second chorus, if you pay attention, is much more epic. The voice is kind of far in the back and the keyboards are swirling and he's singing it differently. Then there's an instrumental break with just the bass and these nice little ethereal synths. And then we get the chorus coming back, and this time somehow it's more moving. One problem I have with Bowie that I hate to say, but sometimes the theatricality comes at the expense of intimacy. And that is, I would say, an issue with Walt Disco as well. You know, it's hard to feel when someone is singing, you know, like it's hard to feel like a connection. But I feel it in this version of the chorus. And then there's another part to this. It's like 5 different parts to this simple song with this great kind of guitar hook at the end, kind of almost like again, kind of a Michael Jackson-y when he uses like heavy metal guitar style. Just so much movement and complexity, and then it ends with this kinds of boots and claps, kind of reminding you of the disco of Walt Disco. What a song, right? Can you please tell me in the comments? I swear I want engagement. I don't ask for engagement that much, but I swear I want engagement on Thunderground Thursdays. Go back and watch my other Thunderground Thursdays and like those, so YouTube can learn I don't have to talk about Kanye in order for you to care about what I have to say. Okay. Maybe I'm just talking about myself. All right. I have another sip of my coffee. Fortunately, Bo has stopped shaking his head. I do want to say, when talking about Bowie, which I'm talking about a lot, the era of Bowie this reminds me of most is not actually his glam era, is not Ziggy Stardust. It's Outside. Someday I'm going to do a video about this album. I think this is probably David Bowie's 3rd best album. That's how good this album is. The industrial quality of this music, the mixture of synthetic instruments and acoustic instruments, very much that's how this album feels to me. Like a mixture of sort of Ziggy Stardust glam with Outside production. Jesus Christ, I want to go back in time and listen to this album again for the first time based on that description. I just described it so well, I want to listen to it. Okay, let's go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker. Worst thing about this album is the 2 worst songs are the first and last song. Oops, I don't know. The album's very well produced, so whoever made that decision did a lot of other good things. But I don't particularly love the first song, Whiteless. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like sort of Sweet Dreams by Eurythmics, kind of synth hits. At times it's almost 9 Inch Nails industrial, which again kind of goes into that David Bowie Outside. I do like the bridge, these kind of synthesizer claps, kind of an epic chorus, the way it's sung. And there's a great outro, like with all these layers on this outro with a nice simple hard guitar line. Like no matter, even if I don't like a song on this album, there's always at least something that jumps in and makes it interesting. Interesting lyrics. For all of my life, I was in the dark. Was I never my type? Was I never my type? Was I never my type? That is a haunting and mysterious phrase. Was I never my type? So like, is that like loving yourself? Is this like, because I think based on the lyricism, this, you know, the lead singer romantically prefers men. So is it like the sort of nature of not being the kind of type of man that you would be into? I don't know what it means, but it's a great line and it's kind of in my head. So I just talked to you about how I don't like this song that much. Meanwhile, I'm talking about how great the song is. What are you going to do? Selfish Lover is the next song, kind of a catchier track, very nice sort of New Order bass. Again, I can tell you that it sounds like New Order bass, but you go ahead and write a good New Order bass line. It's not easy. So much happening on this first verse, like that very strong Bowie-style singing, doubled, a little bell behind the voice, and the guitar kind of comes in and out, and then gets epic at the end, and then the bass starts doubling its notes, and then there's like a metronome sound leading up to the chorus. So much happening. It's playful, it's fun. The lyrics seem almost like written by someone who doesn't speak English. I'm not making it up, sir. Not something for you to discover. Stop there and listen to me. You're just a selfish lover. There's kind of an oddness to it, but I like the theme of a selfish lover. I think that's an important thing in music to have. Also, again, the implication that it's a male-male relationship. There's just not many songs about male-male relationships. Okay, tell me your favorite song about male-male relationships in the comments. I am interested. I know there have been plenty. But proportionally, we're talking 0.001%, okay? So I feel like one reason I like reviewing music that reflects experiences that I don't live myself, is like, I bet if you sleep with a lot of men, or any men, that it probably is hard. There probably are a lot of selfish lovers. So like this kind of like made me think like, you know, Glam. Forcing me to ask these questions. Inviting me to ask these questions. Making it not only acceptable for me to ask these questions, but sort of expected. It's awesome. How Cool Are You is the next song. Oh my God. This song. How cool are you? This song rules. Got the kind of goofy bell sounds. The lyrics, how cool are you with your leather clothes? Really asking over and over again about, are you cool enough? Do you feel cool enough? This sort of reminds me actually of some of the lyrics on Black Country New Road, in that sense of like the fear and the terror of being a lead singer and not being cool enough. I think I hate to tell you, Walt Disco, but I think you're probably cool enough. But there's cool like voice in the back, and then the guitar is doing this kind of funk phrases at the end, like da-da-da, and then there's these claps going da-da-da, all these cool things. Synthesizers going, the la 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 part reminds me a little bit of Kooks in terms of its feel, the David Bowie. You Are So Wow, just like a great mixture of like acoustic instruments and computer instruments and singing and catchy, and it sounds like it could be a musical song, but much better. It's great. Cut Your Hair is the next song. This reminded me a little bit, speaking of Scotland, of Franz Ferdinand, which, they were a one-hit wonder, but actually their albums were quite good, and they were essentially a disco band. Like all their songs. Take me out, on 4 on the floor with the bass drum. People don't really associate that with disco, but that's what it was. Much like Pink Floyd's The Wall was a disco album. Did you not know that? Did you not know that Pink Floyd The Wall is a disco album? Like it might as well have been written by the Bee Gees? Now that I've said that, go back and listen to it. It's going to blow your mind. Franz Ferdinand was kind of a disco band. But here we finally get, in the Walt Disco album, the most real disco-y sound. Again, more great little production details like these horn sounds in the second verse. Reminds me sort of Rapture by Blondie. Very cool instrumental break, this distorted guitar voice, like very weird. I can't figure out what they're singing. According to Lyric Genius, let us be young, cut your hair. But I hear lesbian, cut your hair. Am I the only one who hears lesbian, cut your hair? But then, what does that mean? Like, that could potentially be problematic. So maybe it is Let Us Be Young. Then it ends with Young, Hard, and Handsome, which apparently is some gay porn that the lead singer found and they named their EP after. It's sort of one of the themes that comes back, Young, Hard, and Handsome. Then comes the Stamp Timeline. Then the next track, Be an Actor. Kind of a crooner song here, kind of like weird warbled sounds, kind of unsettling. Like on a keyboard, there's like this little, like if you have a keyboard, there's like this little toggle thing. We go like that. I get the sense the whole time they're playing, they have another guy going like that. Lots of vibrato here. Thematically, it's interesting. Maybe I'd like to be an actor and get married too. Again, the sort of sense of like, who is he and what does he want to be? Next song is called The Costume Change, and Be an Actor into the Costume Change really gives to this theatricality of this moment. Part of the genius of glam music is this theatricality. It's an instrumental song, very kind of hydraulic, almost sounds like Formula One sounds at times, but very cool, very melodic. It actually reminds me a lot of Radiohead's instrumental I Am Citizen Insane. There's some sort of like B-sides from Radiohead, which are really good, these kind of instrumental things. And this hints at more scope. I think if Walt Disco stays together, that they're going to make like at least one like shut up masterpiece. Like this album is very good, like very, very good. And as you'll see at the end of the video, I'm going to buy this album. Okay, so but I get the sense this hints at more. Like I think if they get more comfortable with being cool or uncool or whatever it is, I hope they get enough juice from this that they can put out an album that leans a little bit more into this perhaps more experimental phase so they can sort of like match, like, right? Like, wouldn't it be great to have like a super well-constructed glam album that's also super glammy? Next song, Those Kept Close, continues on this somewhat Radiohead sounding. This sounds like it could be a Tom York song. The instrumental goes quite nice. I found no fault but the answer. Interesting lyrics. His voice is just really clear. Got that belting, screaming style here. I'm gently scarred. Another great lyric. Like, I don't make out all the lyrics on this album, but when I do, they're really quite nice. Sort of an odd change with this bass synthesizer, and it does this cool thing where like There's some settings on a synthesizer where you can't play two notes at once. So like, normally you can go, dun, dun, have it be like in harmony. I can't make two sounds at once, but you get my point. Sometimes there's a setting where like it go, okay, like you can't have two different sounds at once, so that it sounds different. That's the bass line that they're doing at the end here. Dear God, is there a better way to describe that? Could you please tell me? Please. I will remember you. Musical YouTubers are trying to describe that setting on the keyboard. That's and they need something better than that. Hold yourself as high as her. There's like water drops in this song. Like I said, there's a cool drop in this song, and like you're thinking like, Skrillex? No. It's just water drops. But then these great like synthesizer claps as well. Almost like a vocoder sounding voice. Again, this is hinting at more. I love manipulating this voice. He has such a great voice that manipulating it is interesting, and it's not to make up for any deficiency, but to make it better. Great sort of New Order style guitar in the back. Then the next song is My Dear, which just reminds me a lot of Word Up by Cameo. It just does. Or the Roscoe's theme from the movie Tapeheads. No one's going to get that reference. It's okay. So much vocal acrobatics here. I don't have the lyrics in front of me, but I really like it. I especially like the kind of cool percussion towards the end. All these different production details. Good guitar work throughout. Quite subtle. Maybe a bit noisy. Malicent is an amazing track. Quite moving, dirty, kind of. This is where I hear that goth. Every once in a while, people will call this band goth. I don't get it, but I get it here. Kind of a breathless voice, kind of a doubled voice. We should be together. We've been eating forever. This is the kind of song I'd love to see in concert. Great drums here, sort of like kind of epic drums, fuzzy guitar. Everything's kind of spaced out, almost like a My Bloody Valentine vibe at times. A great bit at the end with a very epic guitar and this kind of like sloppy piano way in the back. It's like this hidden layer, like way in the back. Like maybe you heard the song before and you never heard that sloppy piano in the back at the end, but I did. Then we get the final song, If I Had a Perfect Life, sung very nicely, very kind of odd outro, kind of a thumping drum machine bass. I do like this idea, if I had a perfect life, I don't want it, like not wanting a perfect life. I think when I spend more time with this album, I will start to understand the thematics a little bit more. It's not just like, am I cool or not cool? It's just sort of like a surface level, superficial, because that's the fear with glam, is that it's just skin deep. It's just surface. It's just makeup and dresses, right? But it's not. And I mean, okay. You listen to Ziggy Stardust and Hunky Dory and Transformer and Heaven to a Tortured Mind and tell me those are not ridiculously deep albums with very important themes. Of course they are. So I get the sense that the more I sit with this album, the more I will discover the sort of deeper thematics. So there it is. There's Walt Disco. And, thanks to my Patreons, I have a little bit of money to buy music. So I'm going to buy Walt Disco's album. But I'm not only going to buy their album. Did you know this about Scotland? First of all, great band from 20 years ago, Camera Obscura. If you've never heard them, they're from Glasgow as well. This is a great Glaswegian architect, Charles Rennie Mackintosh. He's sort of like, a lot of the stuff that you might like about Frank Lloyd Wright, I think you'd like, about Charlie Rennie Mackintosh. Really great. Glasgow is a great place to go to. But did you know that in Scotland, they're obsessed with tea towels? So I've been to Scotland a couple of times, and every time, like, that's the main tourist thing, are tea towels. So I have an accidental collection of tea towels, and Walt Disco makes a tea towel. They make that merchandise. So I'm going to order their album and a tea towel. So I want to show you some of my tea towel. Now, I did have one that was a Highland cow. I don't know where that one is anymore. Here's just one of the Scottish map. It's pretty nice, So, there's Glasgow. Upside down. There's Glasgow, right over there, right there. There's Edinburgh, which is nice, not as nice. Inverness, super good place to go. I even went to Aberdeen, which people say is boring, but it's very nice, very grey city. That's one of my tea towels. Here's another one, Piping the Haggis. When I lived in Scotland, I ate haggis 5 times a week. I enjoyed it very much. Very good food, kind of soul food, And then, of course, my personal favorite. For someone who's named after a Scottish island and a Scottish song, here is my Isle of Skye tea towel that I bought in the Isle of Skye with my mom and my brother. So I'm going to add to my collection with a Walt disco tea towel. I just, life is good. And if you're lucky enough to have dispensable income to buy something like a Walt disco tea towel, it doesn't matter if your job is tough, or if you have too much paperwork to fill out, or if your dog has an ear infection. It's little things. Okay, till next time, there's the camera.